Hey, what's up, guys? It's Foster. Welcome to another Ask Me Anything question. So, just a quick disclaimer before we get started today. I just moved into a new house for a dog sit, and I'm dog sitting a beautiful Siberian Husky named Nanook. He is actually Portuguese, or at least his mom speaks Portuguese, which is cool, and a little cat named Gizmo. But I don't know how the recording is going to sound, and the cat will probably jump on the table at some point. So let's just see how it goes. Let's go with the flow. So today's question is a really good one. It's a very common question, and yeah, it's a real problem for a lot of people. So someone asked, what can I do when people speak too fast? So this is a super common thing. So let's go for it. So normally our students are struggling with some version of this question. They're having problems with some version of the story. They think that they speak English pretty well. They know a lot of English. When they're doing speaking exercises in classes or doing anything in a class, everything is pretty good and they can understand almost everything. But then when they have to have real conversations with real native speakers, everything is way too fast. And it seems like the person that you were speaking with is just speaking like 1,000 miles per hour. And by the time that you can actually understand what they are saying, they are already talking about something completely different, and you have totally missed the conversation. And personally, I really know this feeling. I feel your pain. I have struggled with this personally a lot in my own language studies. And I know that at least like 90 and 95% of our students have the same problem as well. So what can we do? I guess I would like to break this down into two parts. So on one hand, we have a more philosophical approach. And then on the other hand, we have kind of a more practical approach, tips that you can do today. So let's start with the more philosophical side, the more philosophical ideas. So in my personal opinion, I think that most students are thinking in words, right? So when you start learning English, you learn vocabulary, you learn how to read and write words, and then you learn what they mean. And I think there are a lot of problems with this approach. But the big one is that we do not speak in words. We speak in syllables and phrases and expressions. I know that sounds crazy, but let me try to give an example. So for example, if I say, hey, what you gonna do tonight? You probably know all of those words in that phrase. So we have a pretty simple phrase. We have the phrase, hey, what are you going to do tonight? That is pretty simple, right? Pretty easy. But when I'm speaking fast, when I'm having a normal conversation with my friends, what I really say is, hey, what you gonna do tonight? So I'm combining a lot of these words. So for example, we have one contraction of whatcha. So I'm combining the words what are you into whatcha. And then we also have a contraction of going to, normally turns into gonna. So instead of, hey, what are you going to do tonight? Probably I will say, hey, what you gonna do tonight? So I guess the point of that example is just to illustrate one more time, to illustrate this idea that we do not speak the way that we write. We do not speak in clearly defined words. We talk in weird combinations of sounds and rhythms and melodies. So obviously, my biggest recommendation is to focus on sounds, not words, because if you focus on the sounds of the language, it becomes much easier. Just to understand things like gonna, you will automatically understand that that is the natural transition from going to. But if you're focusing on words, you have to think, okay, I did not understand that part when he said gonna, and then you have to think, oh, it's a contraction of the two words going to. And naturally, with this approach, you will spend a lot more time thinking about weird grammar rules and contractions, and you will spend a lot less time directly involved in the conversation, which is the point. So as always, my advice is focus on sounds. Learn every single possible sound and sound combination that an English speaker can say, and your life will be so much easier. But with that said, because everyone listening to this is already doing sound school and focusing on sounds, I do want to give some more practical advice, like things that you can do today when people are speaking too fast and you just can't understand them. My first recommendation would be to try to change the subject to something that you are more familiar with, to something you've already practiced and memorized in your scripts. So, for example, if I'm saying, I don't know, like, hey man, I've been really busy at work. My boss is killing me with all these projects and he wants to finish before the end of the quarter, and I don't know if I can get all this stuff done because I'm really busy with personal stuff too, you know? You probably can't understand like 50% of that because it's really fast. There's a lot of information. I'm connecting a lot of things. I'm using a little bit of slang, but you can probably understand that I'm talking, at least in general, about my work. So in this case, you could return to your script, return to the topics and the subjects that you are already very comfortable talking about, and say something like, what do you do for work again? And then naturally, the person that you're talking to can tell you everything about their job. And then you can say, oh, cool. Do you like your job? And using this approach of kind of slightly changing the conversation just a little bit, making it slow down without really letting people perceive that that's what you're doing, you are at least maintaining the conversation. You are catching the general idea of the conversation and then continuing to ask questions that you are comfortable asking. So when in doubt, you can always try to slightly change the conversation back to something you are a little bit more comfortable talking about. I know this seems weird. It seems like you are, trying to change the conversation completely, but you're not. I do this all the time and it helps me a lot. So I promise it can be effective in a lot of situations. And finally, there's always the classic approach of simply asking the person to slow down and speak more slowly. So this approach has some positives and negatives. So on one hand, it is a good approach because the person that you are talking to will speak more slowly and you will therefore be able to understand more. However, I do have some disclaimers with this approach because when you ask someone to speak more slowly, it can be problematic for several reasons. First, you are changing the conversation from a natural dialogue to a much more basic one. So if your goal is to understand this really fast native conversation, then you are simply you are prolonging the process of reaching that goal. And secondly, it requires a lot of effort to speak slowly. And so if you try to speak slowly, especially people that don't speak other foreign languages, a lot of people just don't really know how to do that well. So if you think about it, you're kind of asking someone to do a favor, like, hey, slow down for me, please. Speak differently, change your personality. And there's still a good chance that they will not even have the capacity to slow down and you still won't understand you. So that can be problematic. And finally, if you ask someone to speak a little bit more slowly, you are really interfering with the aspect of human connection. So in general, people like when other people let them be themselves, People like when they feel comfortable around people and they can really express their normal personality. And when you ask someone to slow down, you are asking them to change their normal behavior and do something different. And naturally, this will just make things much more difficult to make real human connections and ultimately to make friends. What more? Obviously, there are specific situations where this approach is totally fine. For example, if you are asking for something at a restaurant or any service based industry, in this case, you're not trying to make friends or connect with someone. You are simply just trying to understand the information. So, in that case, it's always good. Like if you were talking to an immigration official, it is totally fine to say, hey, English is not my first language. Can you slow down, please? That's fine. And also, if you're working with a teacher or a language partner, in that case, people will completely understand your situation and they will be more than happy to speak a little bit more slowly because they understand that you are learning, they know where you are coming from, and that you require a little bit more patience. So, just to try to summarize real fast, when people are speaking too fast, there are a few things you can do. First, as always, focus on the sounds of the language, not the individual words. Secondly, you can try to slightly change the subject so you can talk about things you are more comfortable with, ideally things that you have already practiced and memorized with your scripts. And finally, in certain situations, it is a good idea just to ask people to speak more slowly. So I think that's it. That's a great question. Hope I didn't talk too much. I will see you guys in the next Ask Me Anything. Thanks. Bye-bye.